Hi, all. I'm Kathryn Rose, founder and CEO of channelWise. channelWise is a platform that provides channel partners access to vetted, been there, done that experts for one on one video consultations to help them go farther, faster in their business. And today, it's my pleasure to welcome Annette Taber, founder of BoardSwap. Annette and I have worked together for many years, and she has 30 years experience in the IT channel ecosystem, most recently as SVP of Industry and Public Sector Outreach for CompTIA, where she initiated, facilitated, and managed 10 industry advisory boards over the course of 12 years. Previously, she spent 15 years at Tech Data and now has started BoardSwap, an outsourced advisory board and peer group service focused on the tech industry. Welcome, Annette.
Thank you, Catherine. I appreciate you inviting me.
Well, it's always great to speak to you. As I mentioned, we worked together for many years, and I saw how you built the advisory councils over at CompTIA, and you did such an incredible job there. And I just wondered what made you decide to take that information and that experience and really bring it further into the channel and start doing this with specific companies.
Well, I'll tell you, first of all, I absolutely love working with advisory boards. It's my passion. I'm a problem solver, I'm a galvanizer. I like to work with large groups of people. And what I found is advisory boards really offer companies the flexibility to adjust and change based on what problems that are they're facing at the moment. So rather than being stuck with an executive or somebody that may not have that expertise, you can swap them out based on the needs changing over time and maintain the structure of the advisory board.
So let's step back just a little bit and discuss what is the role of advisory boards.
The role of advisory boards is to be a problem solving thinking system. A lot of people think, oh, you're decision makers. Well, really, you're not. A governance board, you're making decisions. But with an advisory board, you're providing guidance, you're providing expertise, subject matter topics that maybe the board doesn't have. Or let's say you're trying to move into a new market, or you're trying to exit your business, or do a merger or acquisition. A lot of times people don't have that expertise on staff, and they want to engage with advisors that really know it and have experienced it and have lived through it. So that really provides flexibility to the company so that as their needs change, the board can change.
So I guess it sounds a little bit different than a governance board that typically has, I think they're like 3-year terms. Would that be right?
Well, it depends. Governance boards are really focused on compliancy and legal fiduciary responsibilities. And as a result, they oftentimes don't have the bandwidth to think strategically about the future of the company. So, one of the trends we see is, in addition to D&O insurance skyrocketing due to the fact that there's so many advisors on these boards of directors that really are, kind of held accountable for what happens to that company. They're exporting some of the strategy and the future planning to formalized advisory boards. And so we work in conjunction with governance boards, and we provide the guidance back to the board of directors in areas like cybersecurity where they may not have that expertise on staff.
So it sounds like the advisory board is more of a fluid kind of a part of the organization where you're bringing folks in and out depending on the expertise that's needed at that moment in time for the company.
Right. And what we do is we work 3 months in advance of any board meeting to really understand the needs of the company. So we do a growth score assessment, we do a value chain assessment, we understand what's going on in the business, and then we develop a charter from that. And working alongside the business partner, we spend a good 3 months before we even host the first board meeting to really understand what their needs are. And then when we develop the charter, we have already identified their top three priorities. And so we select advisors that are fit for purpose, fit for that charter. And once that charter is accomplished, or potentially they need to move to a different problem, that one's solved and now we're fine, and now we have another issue that's come up, you can trade out the advisors but maintain the stable, um, you know protocols, the formality of the structure of the advisory board. So it works really nice, because once you get to know a company and you know their executives and you know their problems, as an independent certified chair, you're consistent. Your protocols are consistent. Your cadence of meetings is consistent, and you can bring in or out experts as needed by maintaining that structure, which gives the company an enormous amount of flexibility.
So I know, as a startup, right? We're looking at putting together an advisory board, and this is such a timely topic for me because we're in the process of this now, but and I think a lot of folks in the startup world, we think, oh, we're just going to get an advisory board. But what I'm hearing you say is that it needs to be a lot more intentional than that. And having someone like you, who is certified, who understands the role of advisory boards, it can be a critical piece in making sure they're successful.
Yeah, we look at five key elements to a successful advisory board, and it really starts with structure and discipline. Most companies, they don't have time to manage an advisory board. They don't have people that are dedicated to it. It's somebody's side job on top of their normal job, and the consistency of the meetings, the disciplined approach of understanding, what the company's current state of the market is, because we expect the company to provide an update to the board, no different than a board of directors. So we know we are getting that feedback loop, but also clarity of scope. Like if you try to solve all the world's problems with an advisory board, you're not going to be successful. If you can do the work up front and really identify what the primary drivers are, that you need to focus on, that clarity of scope develops into a board charter. And that charter is what drives the measurement of the success of the advisory board, which we do at the end of the year. So we do assessments at the beginning of the year, and we repeat those assessments at the end of the year to show the ROI. So, clarity of scope, also independence. A lot of times people will develop an advisory board, and they'll talk to one person and they'll say, oh, well, I know this guy, he'll be great. The best thing to do is not allow your advisors to make recommendations for your board. It's better to have independence of your advisors so that they don't necessarily know each other and you don't end up with the kind of clicky, network of people. And then finally, making sure they're fit for purpose. And that again gets back to the charter. You're going to bring people onto the board based on what you're trying to solve for. So those five key elements are really the most critical.
So when you engage with a client to build the charter and you, I'm assuming you get, into the details about the right type of person, do you also recommend people for the board as well?
Well, that's a great question. As an independent chair and as part of the training that I've been through in the protocols through the Advisory Board Center, which is a professional body for the advisor sector, I can help interview. I can direct you to groups of people, but I cannot appoint your advisors. It is the responsibility of the business to choose their advisors. I can be part of the interview process, but ultimately the business needs to choose their advisors, and I can be a data point in that process.
What types of companies should be looking to form an advisory board? Does it have to be, do you have to have, a company valued at, multi-million dollars? Like what is there some kind of a threshold where you would say, hey, now it's time you would really want to start thinking about putting together an advisory board?
Well, I'll tell you, it's interesting because as you start a business, you typically go to family and friends, and then you go to your maybe your CPA or your lawyer, and then you might have an informal advisory board, and those are the ones where the individuals are volunteers. They're not really paid. They're kind of, people that you like or whatever. What we're talking about here is formalized advisory boards, and these are right underneath the formal governance board. So you've got along the way, you've got these, other advisor types like accountants and things like that. But when you start getting into the formalized advisory board space, you're really looking to pay the advisors that you're
Okay.
looking to bring on. And in doing that, you're going to bring a lot more value to the process. Um, I will tell you, advisors today, you really should be looking at people that are senior executives that have been around for a little while. They have that knowledge. I also look for people that have certain certifications. Um, I know when I was with CompTIA, I would go to industry events in AI, in blockchain, in drones, and I would look at who's speaking because those people have already been vetted.
Yeah.
So you're bringing in the right people. Um, but yes, I mean, advisory boards today, $15 million and up is really the sweet spot. If you're below 15 million, it probably doesn't make sense. And I'm telling you, you can do formalized. We also do informal, right? Like a client I have today, they already had an advisory board in place and they're volunteers. It's a customer advisory board, very popular, right?
Yeah.
Project based advisory boards are also another alternative, and those can be 3 to 6 months. You focus on a problem or project and then you close it down once that's been achieved. So, lots of different ways to do it.
Well, what are some of the emerging issues or trends that you see affecting the tech industry, and how do you anticipate these are going to impact the role of advisory boards going forward?
Well, we touched a little bit about on this with the current state of the economic, situation that we're in. There's a lot of layoffs going on. There's a lot of lack of headcount, a lot of no budget for headcount. And what does a company do, especially when we're all navigating these times, kind of not knowing what to
Right.
expect? And so I think a good reason why right now people are doing advisory boards is they want to road test things. They want experts that know how to get into a new market. They want to talk to people that know how to launch a new product or how to modify a partner program. They maybe it's succession planning. I mean, ultimately, it could be just about anything because no matter what it is that company is struggling with, you can find the subject matter experts to bring in to give them that guidance that they need.
So you mentioned that it's important to find people with the subject matter expertise to put on your advisory board. But I think sometimes the misconception is that this is going to be a working board, right? You get the right advisors, and then they're going to do the work.
That's not true. Yeah, you're right. Advisory boards are just that. They're advisors. Unlike a formal governance board where they're making the decisions for the company and then the CEO is executing on those decisions with the rest of the business, formalized advisory boards are thinking systems. They're really nothing more than thinking systems and problem solvers. So, what you want to do is you want to use your advisory board to help you gain confidence in your decision making. At the end of the day, that's one of the things we measure for ROI is at the beginning of the year versus at the end of the year. But we also do a growth score assessment and a value chain assessment. And those assessments are redone at the end of the year. So we can clearly see the value that the advisory board brings to the table when we can measure the results from the beginning to the end of the year.
So when you're going to look at setting up an advisory board, as you mentioned, some of it could be around a specific topic. would you look at it and say, okay, you want to accelerate growth in this area. This may be like a 3-month project, and let's bring folks together for like a quarter, or is it typically like you want to follow it throughout the year?
Well, it's interesting. According to the Advisory Board Center, there has been a 52% increase in project based advisory boards since 2019.
Wow.
And what that tells me is people just don't have headcount. They don't have bandwidth. They don't have enough time to stop the chaos of the normal business and what they have to do to keep it going, to think about the future, about future proofing or what has to happen in the future. So yes, I would definitely say, what we want to do is we want to make sure that we have people that understand the business. So we ask the business to provide a board report before the meeting. We make sure that the board itself sees, okay, this is the problem. Here's the solution. We give it back to them. They have to come to that next board meeting and do a report. What happened? Because one thing that I've noticed is a lot of advisory boards never get that loop closed. And
Right.
then they come to the meetings and then they're like, well, we gave all that feedback. What happened to it? Did you do anything with it? And so that closing of the loop is truly important in the process too.
I think that is a really important point because I know myself being on boards and advisory boards and even, volunteer boards, that is a source of frustration that you come and you're giving your expertise and ideas and then you don't see anything really kind of ever come to fruition on it. So that's a really, really good point. You also mentioned in your experience, paying the advisors is something that you would recommend. Do you have any kind of a range that you would typically recommend for companies to that are thinking about setting up advisory boards of what they should be thinking about in terms of budget?
Yes, absolutely. There's research that's been done on this, and I will tell you it ranges anywhere from $2,000 to $5,000 per board meeting.
Okay.
Board meetings typically run 4 hours or a half a day once a quarter. So you're looking at, anywheres from 8 to 20 grand a
Yep.
year per person. What I'm also seeing is a lot of the advisors I've worked with, and I've had 300 to 400 of them go through the ranks of my councils over the years. Um, People are aging out, and they're looking for alternatives. They don't necessarily want another corporate position. So we are going to, in phase 2 of Board Swap, we are going to be launching a advisors concierge service. We already have access to advisors, but it'll be a little bit more formalized. And, what we say is that relationship is between the business and the advisors. So whatever their, commercial agreement is between them. I am not involved in that. But I can point people to groups of advisors that they can search from, similar to kind of what you do with channelWise, and they can select the advisors that are the best suited for them.
Well, it's interesting you mentioned channelWise because I know that you and I talked about it, and we're so happy to have you on as an expert. And what made you decide to join us? I mean, obviously with Board Swap, it is a little bit of a different model in the sense that you're really interviewing people for a long-term kind of paid position. And channelWise, we just want to offer that quick, practical, tactical advice. But tell the audience a little bit about why you decided to join on with us.
Well, I do consulting as well, and sometimes people just want you to give them feedback. They have a quick question, they just want to get a quick answer and move on. And so I think ChannelWise provides a great service for that. If it's a longer term project or a more strategic move for the company, then an advisory board makes more sense. We also do peer groups. So peer groups are more like 6 to 8 executives that are in similar businesses that are non-competing, and they meet once a month, and I facilitate those as well. it just depends, you know, what the company is trying to solve for, to give them the right antidote, right?
Yes, fantastic. And I mean, and obviously, just from the history of everything that you and I've had together and me seeing you and all the incredible advisory boards that you've built over the years, that board swap sounds like the perfect solution. And anyone out there who wants to get an advisory board set up, please reach out to Annette. You can book a call with her here on channelWise. And we really, really appreciate you joining us today. Is there any last thoughts that you'd like to leave with the audience with today, and just in general about setting up an advisory board?
Well, I would just say that closing the gap between knowing and doing is what when is how thought meets action.
Okay.
So people talk about what they want to do, but actually doing it and having the right knowledge to make those decisions, that's what an advisory board brings to the table. Confidence in your decision making.
Fantastic. And the one last thing I wanted to say too, just because as we're, getting geared up here to start bringing on an advisory board, I think one of the important things that you brought up too is making sure that you understand what an advisory board does, and do you have the time to manage it, take the feedback and enact the feedback, right? Because you don't want to, set off on this advisory board journey and then have a whole bunch of frustrated people, including your internal
Right.
team, right? So
Exactly.
this is great. And thank you so much, Annette, for joining us today. And those of you out there, thank you for joining us. If you'd like to get deeper advice about how to get started with advisory boards, set up your advisory boards or peer groups, head over to Annette's expert profile on channelWise. We'll put the link into the post. Or if you have other questions on different topics, of course, we have many experts on the channelWise platform, all ready to help you or your partners go farther, faster in your business. Thank you so much again, Annette. And until next time, everyone.